Part 1: The Breakup Bombshell. It all started 3 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday, when Kelly, my girlfriend of 6 years, dropped the news that would change everything. We were sitting on the couch in our tiny apartment, the one we decorated together with second-hand furniture and framed prints of places we always said we'd visit someday. She was quiet at first, nervously fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "Can we talk?" she asked, barely meeting my eyes. Now, I'd heard that tone before, usually when she was mad about something small, like me forgetting to take out the trash or leaving the toilet seat up. But this time, her voice wavered. My stomach sank. "Sure," I said cautiously. What followed was a train wreck of a conversation. She said she loved me but didn't think we were meant to be. That she wanted to experience true love. The kind of connection that gives you butterflies every day, not just on special occasions. I sat there, dumbfounded, as she explained how she felt like she was settling, even though I'd always done everything I could to make her happy. "You're an amazing guy," she said, which somehow made it worse. "But I just don't think you're my amazing guy." Her reasoning was straight out of a cheesy rom-com. She needed to find herself, and see what else was out there. Apparently, 6 years of shared memories, laughter, and plans for the future weren't enough. "Wait," I said, my voice barely steady. "Are you seriously throwing this away for some abstract idea of true love? What does that even mean?" Her face twisted with guilt, but she held her ground. "I don't want to wake up one day and regret not taking this chance." Regret. That word stuck in my throat like a bad piece of advice. It was ironic because I could already feel the regret bubbling up in me. Regret for not seeing this coming, for not realizing that the person I thought I'd spend my life with was already halfway out the door. The worst part? She wasn't angry or cruel. She genuinely believed this was the right thing to do. It wasn't about a fight or a betrayal. It was about her chasing some nebulous dream of happiness that didn't include me. I didn't fight her on it. What was the point? If someone doesn't want to be with you, trying to convince them otherwise just prolongs the heartbreak. So I helped her pack her things, and just like that, she was gone. For weeks, the apartment felt hollow, like an echo of the life we'd built together. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her, the blanket she loved to curl up under, the mug she always used for her morning coffee. Even the stupid fridge magnets we'd collected on road trips felt like tiny knives in my chest. I tried to distract myself with work and friends, but it felt like I was just going through the motions. Then came the social media posts. Oh, the posts. Kelly didn't go off the grid like some people do after a breakup. No, she seemed to thrive on sharing her new chapter. Pictures of her smiling at yoga retreats, sipping artisanal lattes, and posing under inspirational quotes about choosing herself, filled my feed. At first, I avoided looking, but curiosity always got the better of me. And every time I saw her radiant smile, it felt like a punch to the gut. How could she be so happy while I was still picking up the pieces? The final straw came when she posted a photo of a sunset with the caption, "Sometimes you have to let go of what's good to find what's great." That was the moment I blocked her. In the months that followed, I started to rebuild. I focused on my career, picked up new hobbies, and even tried dating again. It wasn't easy, but I was slowly finding my footing. Little did I know, Kelly wasn't done shaking up my world. And her next move? It would be even more ridiculous than the breakup itself. Part 2: Life goes on, or so I thought. It's funny how life has a way of going on, even when you feel like you're stuck in a loop. It's like the world just moves around you while you're sitting there, frozen in place, trying to put yourself back together. But slowly, things started to change. I joined a gym, something I'd put off for years, mostly because I hated the idea of people staring at me while I tried to lift weights that were probably way too heavy. But eventually it became a routine. I began to notice how much better I felt, both physically and mentally, as my muscles grew and the cloud of sadness I'd been carrying around started to lift. I also threw myself into my job. I had always been a workaholic, but after the breakup, it became my safe zone. I'd go in early and leave late, feeling productive, feeling like I had control over something, anything. And when I wasn't working, I'd go out with friends. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just the occasional happy hour or dinner with old college buddies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to keep me distracted. Then, one evening, I ran into Kelly. Well, not into her, but I saw her on social media. It wasn't planned, of course. I had gotten a message from an old friend who I hadn't heard from in a while, and in catching up, we exchanged Instagram handles. It was all pretty casual until I came across a post from Kelly. I almost didn't recognize her at first. The woman in the picture was beaming, standing beside a man I didn't know, his arm around her waist, a warm smile plastered across his face. It didn't take long for me to connect the dots. She had moved on. Fast. Really fast. The caption read, "My heart has found its home. Red heart #blessed #new beginnings." I'll be honest, my initial reaction wasn't one of hatred or bitterness. It was more of a dull, aching emptiness, like someone had just taken a Sharpie and crossed out something I had once written in my personal history. I wanted to feel angry. I wanted to scream and throw something at my TV as I stared at her post, but I didn't. It was just disappointing. A few weeks passed, and I continued my slow climb back to normalcy. But then came the news from an unexpected source, our mutual friend, Tom. He was the type of guy who kept his ear to the ground, always knowing what was going on in everyone's life, whether you liked it or not. Tom wasn't one to sugarcoat things either, so when he called me one night, I braced myself for what was coming. "Dude, you're not gonna believe this," Tom started, as if he had just uncovered the next great conspiracy. "Kelly's dating a guy named Brian now. And get this, he's got 2 kids. Yeah, 2. I couldn't help but let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Wait, what? She's dating some guy with kids already?" It sounded almost comical. Kelly, the girl who used to say she wasn't ready to even think about having children, was now suddenly playing stepmom? The universe had a weird sense of humor. But Tom wasn't done. "Yeah, and get this, apparently they're getting serious. Like, really serious. They're talking about moving in together." I let that sink in. It hadn't even been a full year since we broke up, and Kelly had already found a guy who came with a whole family. And not just any guy, this Brian guy was apparently everything she'd been looking for. "Damn," I muttered. "That was quick." Tom chuckled. "You should see him. Nice guy, but a little, well, let's just say he's been around. I'm talking about the kind of guy who needs a few extra bucks here and there. I heard he's been struggling a bit. Maybe Kelly's just trying to help him out." Something about that felt off. I didn't know Brian, but the way Tom described him didn't sit right. It was like he was a guy who could take advantage of someone's good intentions, and Kelly had always been the kind of person who tried to fix things, even when they didn't need fixing. But I didn't dwell on it too much. I didn't know Brian, and to be honest, it wasn't my problem anymore. Life went on, and I continued with my routine. Work, gym, socializing with friends, the occasional short-lived fling that I never took seriously. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't wonder about Kelly sometimes. The way she was moving on with such ease, the life she was building with Brian and his kids, it almost felt like a personal defeat. Then, one evening, while I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone at a bar, I saw something that would stop me dead in my tracks. Kelly had posted another picture, this time from a family barbecue, Brian's kids in the background, his ex-wife somewhere in the corner of the shot. But what grabbed my attention was the caption. It was more than just a happy family photo. It was Kelly's words. "Taking on the world, one stepmom moment at a time. Red heart #my new life #family first." And that's when the nagging thought hit me, was I ever really enough for her? The question lingered, unanswered, as I shut off my phone and downed the rest of my beer. I wasn't angry anymore, just unsettled. It wasn't until later that I realized how much Kelly's decisions affected me. They weren't just her decisions anymore. They were our past being rewritten, and I wasn't ready to let it go. But the universe, it seemed, was already moving on without me. Part 3. The Message. 2 years later, out of the blue, I get a text from Kelly. No hi or how've you been? Just straight to the point. Hey, can we talk? It's important. Curiosity got the better of me, so I called her. She wasted no time. So Brian and I have been talking, she began. You know he has kids, right? Yeah? What does that have to do with me? Well, we were thinking, you always said you'd be there for me. And I know you don't have kids, so... That's when she dropped the bombshell. Kelly and her new husband wanted me to help financially support his kids. Part 4. A shocking proposal. I spent the rest of the day trying to wrap my head around the absurdity of Kelly's request. I mean, how does someone even come up with that idea? Asking your ex to help fund your new life, complete with a husband and kids that aren't even his. It sounded like the kind of story you'd hear at a bar and laugh off as fake, but no, this was my reality. I figured that was the end of it. Kelly had overstepped, I'd shut her down, and life would go on. But I was wrong. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Kelly. It was an unfamiliar number, and against my better judgment, I answered. Hey, is this Alex? A man's voice asked. Yeah? Who's this? It's Brian. Kelly's husband. I nearly dropped my phone. Why was this guy calling me? And how did he even get my number? Okay, I said cautiously. What's this about? Well, he began, his tone polite but tinged with something else. Expectation, maybe? Kelly told me she reached out to you about the situation with the kids. I just wanted to follow up and, clear the air. Clear the air? I repeated, already bracing myself. Yeah. Look, I know it might seem a little unorthodox, he said, chuckling awkwardly. But we're in a bit of a tough spot right now. The kids' tuition is piling up, and we've had some unexpected expenses lately. Kelly mentioned how supportive you were in the past, and honestly, I think it's admirable that you'd even consider helping. Whoa, hold on, I interrupted. Who said I was considering anything? There was a pause on his end, as though he hadn't anticipated resistance. Well, Kelly made it sound like you were open to the idea. I mean, you don't have kids, right? So it's not like you've got a ton of other financial responsibilities. I couldn't believe the nerve of this guy. Let me get this straight, I said, my frustration bubbling over. You're asking me, her ex, to pay for your kids' school tuition because you can't afford it? And your justification is that I don't have kids of my own? Well, he said, sounding slightly defensive now, it's not just about the money. It's about helping family. Family? I nearly shouted. Brian, I'm not part of your family. I'm not even part of Kelly's life anymore. You two chose this life together, so maybe figure it out together. His tone shifted, becoming more serious. Look, man, I get it. This might seem weird to you, but it's not like we're asking for a handout. It's just temporary, until we get back on our feet. And why is that my problem? I shot back. I don't even know you. And honestly, this is insane. If you're struggling, maybe reconsider your priorities instead of calling your wife's ex-boyfriend for help. Brian let out a frustrated sigh. You don't have to be so dismissive. I'm just trying to do what's best for my kids. I thought you'd understand that. At that point, I'd had enough. No, Brian. What I understand is that you're asking someone who owes you nothing to solve your problems. Maybe spend less time guilt-tripping me and more time figuring out how to support your own family. He tried to say something else, but I hung up before he could finish. My blood was boiling. The audacity of not just Kelly but now Brian too, it was beyond comprehension. Over the next few days, I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. What kind of relationship dynamic did they have where this even seemed like a reasonable idea? And why did Kelly think it was okay to put me in this position? But as it turned out, the saga wasn't over. The very next week, I got another call, this time from Kelly again. Alex, she said as soon as I picked up, her tone sharp. Brian told me about your conversation. He said you were really rude to him. I laughed bitterly. Rude? Kelly, he called me out of nowhere to ask for money. How else was I supposed to react? He wasn't trying to offend you, she said, clearly annoyed. He's just trying to do what's best for his kids. I thought you'd at least hear him out. Kelly, I said, struggling to keep my cool. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like I'm some kind of villain because I don't want to pay for your husband's kids. That's not my responsibility. It never was. She huffed. I just don't understand why you're being so selfish. You used to care about me, about us. I thought you'd want to help. That was the last straw. Kelly, let me make this crystal clear. I don't owe you or Brian anything. Not a single cent. You made your choice to leave, and you've built a new life. Good for you. But that life is yours to deal with, not mine. Stop dragging me into your mess. With that, I hung up again, this time for good. I blocked both their numbers and decided I was done. Done with the drama, done with the ridiculous demands, and done letting Kelly and her new life invade mine. But as I would soon learn, cutting them off wouldn't be enough to end this saga. There was still more to come. Part 5, my character, is questioned. I thought cutting off Kelly and Brian would be the end of it. But of course, they weren't done. A few days after blocking their numbers, I started hearing whispers from mutual friends. Did you really refuse to help Kelly and her family? That's cold, one friend texted me. Apparently, Kelly had been spinning a sob story about how I refused to help when they needed me most. Conveniently, she left out the part about asking me to pay for her new husband's kids. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly judging me, calling me selfish or bitter. The worst moment came when someone confronted me at a coffee shop. Kelly always said you were so generous. It's sad to hear how you treated her, she said. I snapped. Did she also tell you she asked me to pay for her husband's kids? Or that his tuition bills are somehow my responsibility? The woman stammered and quickly backed off, clearly unaware of the full story. I had enough. That night, I posted a simple message on social media, laying out the facts. I didn't name names, but I made it clear I wouldn't tolerate being smeared for refusing to bankroll someone else's life. Most people were supportive, but a few still thought I should have handled it better. To them, I said, respecting yourself doesn't mean being a pushover. Kelly and Brian weren't finished, though. Their next move? Even more ridiculous. Part 6, The Fallout. After my post, I thought things were over. But soon, Brian called again, claiming he was disappointed. I aired private matters publicly. You're disappointed? I snapped. You've been spreading half-truths to make me look bad. I'm just defending myself. He tried to guilt me again, saying, we're just trying to do what's best for the kids. But I shut him down. Your kids are your responsibility, not mine. I hung up, hoping it was the end. Then Tom called, saying Kelly was now telling people I'd had a meltdown online. And a week later, I ran into Brian at the grocery store. Alex, we need to talk, he said, blocking my path. No, we don't, I replied. Leave me alone. I'm not paying for your kids, and I'm done with this nonsense. He called me difficult and said Kelly thought I was a good guy. I shot back. A good guy doesn't let people take advantage of him. And walked away. While some mutual friends sided with Kelly, I stood firm. But Kelly and Brian weren't done yet. They had one more absurd move up their sleeves. Part 7, The Lesson Learned. I thought I'd seen it all, but Kelly and Brian weren't quite finished with their campaign to rope me into their mess. Their final stunt was so over the top that even I couldn't believe it at first. One evening, as I was winding down after work, I got a text from an unknown number. It wasn't Brian this time, but someone claiming to be a mediator. Hi Alex, I've been contacted by Kelly and Brian to help resolve some issues between you all. Can we set up a time to talk? A mediator? I almost laughed out loud. What issues were there to mediate? I had no ties to them, financial or otherwise. I ignored the message, thinking it was just another ploy. But the next day, I received an email. This time, it was more formal, an actual legal notice. Kelly and Brian were trying to file a claim for unfulfilled promises of financial support. Promises? I was floored. The email accused me of implied commitments, based on my past relationship with Kelly and my supposed financial stability. They actually had the audacity to try to frame this as me abandoning some kind of responsibility to them. I immediately forwarded the email to my lawyer. "This is ridiculous, right?" I asked during our call. My lawyer chuckled. "It's absurd," he said. "They don't have a leg to stand on. But you'll still need to formally respond, just to shut this down." What followed was a week of back-and-forth correspondence between my lawyer and theirs. Kelly and Brian's case was so weak it bordered on laughable. But it wasn't funny to me. I was furious. The fact that they'd gone this far just to harass me was beyond comprehension. Eventually, their lawyer backed down. I received an official notice that they were withdrawing the claim, with no further explanation. It was a relief, but the damage was already done. What struck me most was how little shame they had. Kelly had gone from someone I once loved and trusted to someone who seemed willing to do anything to get what she wanted, even if it meant dragging my name through the mud. In the weeks that followed, I did a lot of thinking. At first, I was angry at Kelly, angry at Brian, and even a little angry at myself for not cutting ties sooner. But then I realized something. This whole ordeal had taught me the importance of boundaries. Kelly and Brian's behavior was a harsh reminder that some people will take as much as you're willing to give, and then demand even more. It wasn't about me being selfish, or bitter. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to be manipulated. I started reaching out to old friends to rebuild the relationships that had been strained by the drama. Most of them were supportive once they heard the full story, and those who weren't, well, they weren't worth keeping around. One day, I got another call from Tom. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, laughing. "Kelly and Brian are now asking his ex-wife for help with the kids. Guess their plan B didn't work out." I couldn't help but laugh. It was so predictable it almost felt like poetic justice. Kelly had left me to find her true love, and now she was stuck with someone who couldn't even handle his own responsibilities. The whole saga had been exhausting, but in the end, I came out stronger. I'd learned to trust my instincts, enforce my boundaries, and most importantly, recognize when it was time to walk away from toxic people. Sometimes, life throws you into situations that seem absurd or unfair, but they teach you valuable lessons about yourself and the people around you. And if there's one thing I've learned from this mess, it's that protecting your peace is worth more than any relationship, past, present, or future. As for Kelly and Brian, I wish them well, from a very safe distance.